Mass Effect. If you've clicked on this video, it's a franchise that hardly needs any introduction. It's one of the most beloved sci-fi RPG shooter hybrids from the late 2000s and early 2010s. It has rich, vibrant world building that lots of other games struggle to match in complexity and emotional resonance. And you can also f*** aliens. But above all else, one of players' favorite aspects of the trilogy is the difficulty system. Now, mind you, difficulty settings in games are a pretty controversial topic, but when it comes to Mass Effect, it's more about the memes. That is to say, Mass Effect, while an incredible cinematic experience, has combat that, well, leaves a lot to be desired.
Oh no.
From buggy AI and physics to randomly OP enemies like Kai Ling, Mass Effect is more of a story game for many. Even so, lots of players prefer the highest difficulty the games offer: insanity. On paper, it's harder than another high difficulty setting called hardcore, which is really saying something. I've played the first 3 Mass Effect games tons of times, but until recently, I'd never played on insanity. My friend gave me the idea to stream a blind experience of this difficulty setting. So after taking a few weeks to practice on veteran and hardcore, I did just that. And here's what I learned. Let's get started. First things first, I should explain some story things for those who are unaware. And beware, spoilers do lie ahead. The Mass Effect trilogy takes place in the 2180s, when humans and aliens have colonized the galaxy, partially based on the technology of an extinct precursor race called the Protheans, who were wiped out by a race of organic synthetic hybrids called the Reapers. Much of inhabited space is controlled by the Citadel Council, and the Council assigns members of various species to become Spectres, who can operate above the law. In Mass Effect 1, you primarily fight members of the Geth, another machine race. I say members of, as we learn in the second game that these Geth are considered heretics, and ME1 also reveals early on that the Geth were originally created by the Quarians, who are driven by the Geth from their homeworld and now roam the galaxy as essentially refugees. The heretics are under the influence of the rogue Turian Spectre Saren, who is being indoctrinated by the Reaper Sovereign. Saren is looking for the conduit, which leads directly into the heart of the Citadel, facilitating an assault by Sovereign. And you're given command of the human alliance ship Normandy by her CO, Captain Anderson, to stop Saren. Mass Effect 2 sees a detour to stop aliens called the Collectors from abducting human colonists. You recruit an even bigger squad to help take down the Collectors, and part of the preparation for this suicide mission sees you perform loyalty missions to gain your squad's full, well, loyalty. And in Mass Effect 3, you respond directly to the Reaper invasion of the Milky Way, making deals with various races to obtain war assets. Throughout the trilogy, in addition to projectile and some particle weapons, you and your squad have access to abilities. These come in 3 varieties: tech, combat, and biotics, essentially space magic. As I'll expound upon in a minute, the class I chose to start this run is Adept, or a pure biotic. I of course have plenty more in-depth videos on various aspects of Mass Effect's lore, particularly alien biology, a playlist of which is linked in the description. Before I started playing Mass Effect 1 on Insanity, I had to make some decisions about my character and build. While I enjoy playing as Male Shep to romance characters like Tali as much as the next guy, personally I prefer playing usually as FemShep, and anybody who has a problem with that can click off right now. I'd done some limited research on optimal weapons and classes for an Insanity run, so I decided to play as an Adept. I could change my class when importing into the subsequent games, but for one, biotics are very powerful compared to other movesets, and I also had access to a sniper rifle as my bonus talent, perfect for me since I'm more comfortable with range attacks in games like this. Also, it's appropriate that I decided to start this run as a powerful biotic bitch because I had what I thought was the absolute funniest idea for the RPG side of this run. I usually play Paragon, so just to be different, I decided to play as a renegade, and I named my character Karen Shepard. That's right, one of my mods was distraught, but chat thought it was hilarious, just saying. I even gave my Shepard blonde hair to boot. Now she's ready to go speak to the manager. And somebody told me to give her pink lipstick. It would become a little distracting in cutscenes, but we could change this when importing into 2. Anyway, once I started the run, I explained that I would be exploring lots of the dialogue options hidden behind the investigate button on the dialogue wheel. The reason for this is because I wanted to build up as much XP as I could to pass various Paragon or Renegade checks down the road, which would unlock certain paths and make certain kinds of endings easier to achieve. More on that later. Once we arrived on the human colony of Eden Prime to investigate a Prothean artifact, I had access to some basic powers like Warp and Throw, and I went ahead and distributed some squad points into Intimidate. I also threw some points towards my class specialization, which would help reduce the cooldown time of my powers. This was crucial, as it would become for my squad mates as well, so that I didn't have to waste as many bullets on more powerful enemies. I even made sure to level up Jenkins, the most important squad mate in the game. Oh god, no, not Jenkins! Also, chat suggested I had a death counter on screen, which I would unfortunately have to update more than I anticipated. That said, the Geth on Eden Prime were mostly light work. After experiencing a vision from the Prothean beacon and returning to the Normandy, we headed for Citadel space, and I upgraded my armor and unlocked Biotic Barrier, both of which would save me quite a bit in combat down the road. I recruited our favorite ex-cop Garrus and Krogan bounty hunter Rex, leveled them up a bit, and took Rex and our biotic squadmate Caden to confront Fist before saving the Quarian Tally, who has data on Saren. So far, no deaths, although throughout 1, I complained a lot about my weapon's overheating mechanic. People told me I'd miss it in 2 when I ran out of ammo, but I couldn't disagree more. Thermal clips are fairly ubiquitous throughout ME2's maps, and even when you do run out of ammo, you just abuse powers, Fivehead. So while overheating may be more realistic, the game not letting me shoot when I want to shoot, yeah, I'm glad they got rid of that. If you're one of these people who prefers overheating to thermal clips, be sure to leave your full name, address, and social security number in the comments section below. For time efficiency, I skipped a lot of NPC interactions, although this decision may or may not have come back to bite me in the ass, you'll see. But I proceeded to the Citadel Tower once again for my Spectre initiation ceremony with the Council. Back on the Normandy again, I almost had my entire squad recruited, and we'd be heading for Therum to save the Asari scientist, Dr. Liara Tassoni, to add her to the team. First, though, I changed my weapons loadout and headed to the lockers on Deck 3 to do the same for my squad. Now, Mass Effect 1's weapon upgrade system is, in a word, dog shit. The menus are incredibly complicated, and there is such a glut of specializations that the differences between them start to feel arbitrary and unnoticeable. They even throw in some that reduce the amount of damage you inflict, like, what the hell? But I still wanted to apply some upgrades to everybody's weapons and armor, just to give them the slightest edge, and I could of course sell the surplus. After arriving at Therum, my chat picked Rex as my biotic support and Tally as my tech complement, both appropriate as we'd be fighting a lot of shielded Geth again on this planet. Once we reached a certain section with stalkers and an armature, I actually had to engage with the game's mechanics for assigning squad mates to specific positions for cover using Q and E. I typically dislike doing this as it just highlights how stupid the AI in the game can be, but it did end up being necessary. Unfortunately, I experienced my first deaths on this section, but on my more successful attempts, I was able to advance forward while keeping my barrier up to confront the Geth more head-on. I did have to revive my squad mates with Unity a few times, but after we whittled down the armature and took out the remaining enemies, we were able to proceed into the complex where Liara was trapped. We freed Liara and rode a platform to a section where you fight more Geth and a Krogan. If I haven't mentioned it before, Krogan are very tanky in Mass Effect, and this one was no different. I directed my squad mates to specific cover, and I focused on taking out the Krogan first, then cleaning up the Geth. It took a few tries, but I locked in, and we finally made it out, and I had my full squad. I upgraded my squad's weapons and armor once again, took a break for dinner, and then traveled to Pharos. This planet was going to be a massive pain in the ass since we had to fight the Thorian, a sentient plant controlling colonists' minds. This fight involves fending off a bunch of Minecraft creepers and continually regenerating Asari clones. I decided to take Liara and Rex so I could take advantage of triple biotics. I leveled up Rex a bit, unlocking the combat ability Carnage, and maxed out Liara's class specialization to reduce her recharge time, since she already died on the way from the landing zone to the Zoo's Hope colony, and I unlocked Stasis for myself, even though I don't really use it in battle, and leveled up my pistol training and maxed out Charm. After clearing out some Geth and taking the Mako from Zoo's Hope to the Exogeny colony, I had to switch to my shotgun to take out some Varen, who would not leave me the fuck alone. As I often do, I got lost a few times and ended up dying to some Krogan in an optional part of the map, but I finally figured out which damn staircase to take and severed the claw from the Geth dropship. After meeting with the Exogeny scientists to inquire about the Thorian, I equipped some nerve gas grenades to subdue the remaining colonists under the Thorian's control. This isn't really the true renegade path, but it just feels wrong not to try. On my way back to Zoo's Hope, though, I accidentally took the wrong staircase again and ended up underneath the colony where you reactivate some water valves, a tedious side mission I haven't done in like 3 or 4 years, so that triggered the fuck out of me.
This valve looks like part of a large system. There are likely others we need to activate.
I swear to God, I have skipped this.
Doesn't look like it's on yet.
I've skipped this my past several playthroughs without knowing it. Where did I go? But anyway, I cleared out the creepers on the surface and gassed the rest of the colonists, and then it was time to proceed to the Thorian. Since Mass Effect 1 doesn't have as many autosaves as 2 and 3, I abused manual saves in between waves of creepers and clones just so I wouldn't be streaming until 3 AM. Hey, don't blame me for using features programmed into the game. It took a few deaths, but we finally finished the damn Thorian, which gave us the cipher to help decode more of the vision from the beacon, and got the hell off this godforsaken planet. Then we headed for Novaria, where we'd encounter Liara's mother, Matriarch Benezia, who was under Saren and Sovereign's influence. For story reasons, I brought Liara, also so I could take advantage of her biotics against lots of organic enemies, and my chat picked Tally again as my second squad mate. Unfortunately, I didn't end up taking Garrus on a lot of missions this playthrough, though to be fair, Tally's AI hacking ability would come in handy pretty often, given the copious amount of Geth you fight throughout the game. Novaria doesn't have as many Geth as other missions, but they definitely show up in the fight with Benezia. I talked with the Turian businessman Lorik Keen, who promised to give me a garage pass to leave Port Hanshan if I downloaded some data from a computer in his office at Synthetic Insights, which was being used by the corrupt administrator Analeus to blackmail him. For some reason, unlike on most of my lower difficulty practice playthroughs, I had not built up enough morality points to avoid a fight with the guards as you enter Synthetic Insights. I took them out without any problem, but it was unfortunately a sign of things to come. I got the data from Lorik Keen's computer and also convinced him to testify against Analeus, for which I was awarded the pass by Novaria Internal Affairs investigator Gianna Parasini. At peak 15, the Rachni on a roof where you repair landlines proved deeply annoying, so I had to really make sure I kept my barrier on at all times, but this encounter did give me enough points to finally unlock Singularity. Some Geth near a Helium-3 line used Overload on me, so I had to switch weapons to take them out, and I cleaned up some remaining Rachni before reaching the tram to the science labs.
Tally, no! Right behind you! No!
On lower difficulties, after activating a neutron purge to destroy all remaining Rachni on Novaria besides the Queen, it's possible to just run past the Rachni soldiers to the elevator without having to inflict any damage, but unfortunately, that doesn't work on Insanity. It took a few tries, but once again we whittled them down a little, and then I made a run for it. Funny enough, the fight with Benezia, where you fight waves of Geth and Asari commandos, I actually did Deathless on Insanity, thanks in part to Tally's AI hacking ability, allowing her to program the Geth to turn on each other. Nice. Okay, I say Deathless, but I got a little greedy and didn't even use any ammo against Benezia herself, which quickly backfired, resulting in another death. Fortunately though, there's an autosave before that phase of the fight, so with my head back in the game and taking advantage of the assassination ability, my squad and I proceeded to take her down easily. So, almost a Deathless Benezia fight. To remain consistent with my Renegade run, I killed the Arachnite Queen, and that concluded day 1 of my run. A week later, I started stream, immediately having landed on the planet Vermeer, where Saren is breeding Krogan immune to the genophage, a biological weapon deployed on the Krogan centuries ago by the Turians and Solarians. On this mission, I'd be fighting Saren directly, and I had Rex and Tally in my squad. My Charm and Intimidate talents were by this point maxed out, so I was hoping I had enough morality points to pass some important checks. The first one would be a confrontation with Rex on the beach, where you have to convince him to stand down after learning Saren is bred Krogan immune to the genophage. I did make one minor mistake in sending Caden to help Solarian Captain Kirihi and his men instead of Ashley, which meant that I would be fighting Saren in a different location from where I've mostly faced off with him before, but let me just tell you, that would be the least of my problems. After blasting through some waves of Geth and Krogan, I made it to the top floor of the breeding facility, where we encountered an Asarian Krogan scientist and some actual husks. Not creepers, but husks, damn it, giving us a preview of the shit we'd be dealing with in ME2. The recommended strategy for this room is to rush to the far side near the exit door to provide cover while you take out the enemies. We got a lore dump from Sovereign before heading to the site where crew from the Normandy plant a nuke we're going to use to, well, nuke the breeding grounds from orbit. We fought our way through some more Geth and Krogan, and when I had to make the decision whether to save Caden or Ashley, I chose Caden as, well, I think Ashley's a more fleshed out character. Caden will end up being more useful as a squad mate in Mass Effect 3. Now, normally I send the squad mate that I don't want to save with Kirihi so that I return to the bomb site, but because I chose to send Caden with Kirihi, like I said, since I was sacrificing Ashley, I had to go to a different part of the complex to fight Saren. Either way, Saren sends out a wave of Geth to greet you first, but unfortunately there is no autosave when he shows up on his hoverboard, so if you die, you have to do both phases of the fight all over again. It was at this point I was starting to worry a lot more about not being able to pass some important dialogue checks with Saren. I can't remember if I've ever fought Saren in this location, but after a few deaths, I finally got around to telling my squad mates where to go, and I finished the fight without any problems. I'm telling you, man, 2007 video game AI. Before heading to our next location, I used a bunch of credits I had saved up to purchase the most powerful sniper rifle in the game. But before I could use it on Ilos, location of the conduit, I had to break the Normandy out of being grounded at the Citadel. We punched a reporter for the memes and met Anderson at a bar where he told us he'd buy us some time while we confronted the human ambassador Udina. Then it was off to Ilos. Just as with Novaria, I took Liara for story reasons, since she spent her life studying the Protheans, and Tally for AI hacking, since Ilos would be a very Geth-heavy mission. I distributed as many remaining squad points as I could, and we were off towards the conduit. It's also somewhat easy to get lost on Ilos, but compared to Pharos, I consider the mission light work. We talked to the Prothean Virtual Intelligence, or VI, Vigil, before heading in the Mako for the conduit, which would send us to the Citadel for the final fights. And that's right, I said fights, plural, because, well, lo and behold, I somehow still lacked enough morality points to convince Saren to take his own life. Maybe I talked to one too few NPCs, made one too many Paragon decisions at a critical juncture, I'm not sure, but this meant that before the final fight where Sovereign controls Saren's corpse, I had to do one last fight with Saren himself in the council chamber. And in case you don't know, this is, without a doubt, the hardest fight in the entire game. I'm not kidding when I say my death counter almost doubled just during this last part of the run. Just like with our alternate encounter on Vermeer, I can't remember if I've ever had to do this fight or not, but I certainly struggled. Admittedly, I did spend quite a long time using suboptimal cover until one of my chatters suggested I hide behind some columns on the right side of the room. I still had to fend off lots of Geth, but this suggestion certainly helped. I probably could have saved myself a few dozen deaths, but whatever. Funny enough, while some people struggle with this last part with the Saren puppet, it usually isn't difficult for me at all, and I actually did it deathless on stream. Glad I bought that rifle. In staying true to my Renegade path, even even though Odina stabbed us and will continue to stab us in the back, I chose him to become the first human counselor. While my renegade meter wasn't as full as it needed to be, I did get the red ending, quote unquote, which felt like I was watching a mirror universe version of the ending of Mass Effect 1. All hail the Empire. Seriously though, even though I evidently made some incorrect choices here and there, it didn't matter because I would never have to play Mass Effect 1 on Insanity ever again. After I saved the Citadel, my chat wanted me to start Mass Effect 2 immediately, so after a short break, I did just that. People also told me that ME2 was going to be the hardest on Insanity, but I was skeptical. The reason they said this was because, well, ME2's combat is objectively more complex than ME1's, whereas most enemies in 1 will have shields and maybe a biotic barrier in addition to their normal health bar. Lots of enemies in 2 have some combination of these three plus armor, which introduces a new variable into the mix. This may not sound like a big deal, but on higher difficulties, it becomes even more important in 2 to switch between weapons that are more effective against shields and barriers, more effective against armor, etc. But you know what? As annoying as this sounds on paper, while practicing for my Insanity run, I actually came to enjoy swapping between weapons. It kept me on my toes and also prevented me from completely running out of ammo on certain weapons as quickly. As I should go.
I should go. I should go. I should go.
But I'll tell you guys the truth. I also just abused powers, staying in cover, and letting my squad mates do most of the work.
No point in hiding from it.
And on top of all of that, I think it helped that Mass Effect 2 is, by far, my favorite of the entire trilogy, and one of my favorite games to play in general. I changed my class to Sentinel so I could take advantage of more tech powers like Overload and Tech Armor, though I'd lose my sniper rifle. I also had to pick a new bonus power. Typically I'd choose something like Energy Drain, but my chat suggested I go with a weapon-focused power like armor-piercing ammo. This was one of those times where I shouldn't have listened to chat, since that ability ended up being unusable most of the time. I could have changed this later on using retrained powers, but come on, I had to prove a point. But besides that and some minor cosmetic changes to my character, I kept everything mostly the same. For context, at the beginning of Mass Effect 2, the Normandy is destroyed, and Shepard is killed in an attack by the Collectors. They're revived by the Lazarus Project, funded by the human survivalist group Cerberus. While escaping from the Lazarus Project lab, the Loki mechs gave me a little trouble at the gate since I only had a pistol, but no deaths during the prologue, thank God. After arriving at a second Cerberus facility, I started distributing some points into my class specialization to reduce power recharge times, and learned about the missing human colonists from the Elusive Man, Cerberus's leader. Lazarus Project Director Miranda Lawson and ex-Alliance officer Jacob Taylor kind of act as my handlers, so to speak, and our first mission is to investigate the disappearance of colonists on Freedom's Progress. For some reason, on Hardcore and Insanity, the Fenris mechs on Freedom's Progress have given me a lot of trouble, but you know what? We recover from that too. I don't care if it's harder, we're playing Mass Effect 2, and I get to see my other sci-fi mommy, Tali Zora Naraya. And of course, while I had to try to commit to the Karen Renegade path so I wouldn't miss important checks during this run, when it comes to interacting with the Quarians, I've got such a soft spot for them that I just can't bring myself to be mean. So after learning about the Collector's presence from the Quarian Vitor's security footage, I let him return to the Quarian migrant fleet, which was actually a good call anyway, as that would come back into play later when we do Tali's loyalty mission. But after Freedom's Progress, the Elusive Man gave me the Act 1 dossiers. Fun fact, the reason the Elusive Man doesn't give you the dossiers for everyone you're recruiting at once is because the Xbox version of the game was split onto 2 discs, and since it's more economical to code for the weakest platform than to make independent versions of the game, that's why you can't recruit characters like Tali, Thane, Samara, or Legion until after the mission on the planet Horizon, despite all 4 having recorded dialogue for pre-Horizon missions. In any event, after boarding the rebuilt Normandy, the Normandy SR2, it was off to recruit my first new squad mate. Master Thief Kasumi Goto. That's right, even though you can recruit the characters Garrus, Grunt, Jack, Kasumi, Morden, and Zaid, more or less in any order, Miranda, i.e. the game, pushes you to recruit Solarian Dr. Morden Solus first. The game even puts you in the Omega Nebula right off the bat, where he's located. Under normal circumstances, this is a smart move, as Morden's Incinerate ability comes in handy for lots of combat throughout the game. That's still true on this run, but lots of Insanity guides recommend heading directly to the Citadel to recruit Kasumi and do her loyalty mission early, since it yields abilities like her Flashbang Grenade, as well as the M12 Locust SMG, which is more balanced than the M9 Tempest. I normally don't care for SMGs since their accuracy is so dogshit, at least at first, but when you run out of bullets for your other weapons, you'll take anything you can get. Plus, Kasumi's loyalty mission is actually pretty fun, so it was a nice way to end off stream that night. Before that, though, I had to start mining planets for resources. The reason I did this on stream instead of doing it off stream and or towards the end of the playthrough is because every last bit of Element 0, Iridium, Platinum, and Palladium I collected and refined would need to be converted into upgrades for my weapons, armor, shields, and so on. And like I said, even though I was visibly more comfortable playing ME2 than ME1, I wanted to give myself as much of an edge as I could. I also got the Normandy crash site mission out of the way just in case I needed the extra XP down the road, and I could also pick up some refined elements. I also met with Anderson on the Citadel, bought some upgrades, punched the reporter again, and did some more side quests before heading out to retrieve Kasumi's late partner Keiji's gray box, which houses a lot of his memories. A week later, on day 3 of the trilogy run, I started stream at the earliest time so far, because that day I planned on finishing off all recruitments within 12 hours. Unfortunately, the actual stream took a little longer than 12 hours, which meant that the last part of Samar's recruitment got cut off, but it's in the VOD I uploaded on my second channel. I was also fundraising for my Fallout video, which is why Lucy will be in the corner for a while. In any event, I was back in the Omega system, ready to recruit Morden. By this point, I'd unlocked Cryoblast, though I still didn't have Warp yet, but I brought Miranda with me as well as Kasumi to take advantage of their biotic and tech powers respectively. I recruited the bounty hunter Zaid Masani real quick, and he reminded me about his loyalty mission, recommending we get it out of the way sooner rather than later. Sorry dude, but you'll have to wait. There can be no delays getting back to mommy. After talking to Arya, I did some more side quests in the Omega markets and bought some upgrades, then made my way to Morden, who tasked us with distributing a cure for the Omega Plague in the station's environmental systems. The Vorcha in this section gave me a little trouble with their rocket launchers, but while it's tempting to want to just take all the enemies out, I finally realized I could bypass lots of them to get directly to the fans. I got Morden all settled in on the Normandy and researched a few more upgrades. Like I said, this would be a regular occurrence as I mined more resources throughout the run. Returning to Omega, I brought Miranda and Morden with me to recruit Garrus. I finally unlocked Warp, and I commented on how I already had a full bar of my Renegade meter, which was a really good sign as it would make it easier down the road to pass those important checks I keep talking about. We made our way into territory controlled by the Blue Suns mercenary group, and I reprogrammed a mech to be on our side, which would help cut down on the number of enemies we needed to kill personally in the upcoming battle. The Vorcha Pyros and Krogan continued to give me some trouble, as did the Varen, and one of the shutters you have to close wouldn't for some reason. But once again, after a few attempts where I got better at keeping my shields up and just became more time efficient overall, I had this mission in the bag. A guide I was using for unique dialogue suggested we go recruit the Krogan Grunt next, since he has some funny things to say on Jack's recruitment mission. So, after mining some more planets, I landed on Corliss, selecting Miranda and Garrus so I could introduce some of his abilities like Concussive Shot into the mix. This mission's also kind of annoying, so it was essentially just grind through some more mercs again. I should also mention that even when I wasn't dying a lot, my squad mates definitely were, so occasionally I would get into situations where I had to just whittle down enemies by myself with bullets and powers while not exposing myself from cover too long. I will admit that this could be a tedious process, but sometimes that was the trade-off for not dying, and that's what it's really about. Trade-offs. You play Mass Effect 2 on Insanity, you have to make sacrifices.
Do you think power like this comes easy? There are sacrifices. You sacrificed too much.
Whether it's going with a class that may seem too easy on lower difficulties, foregoing certain weapons training from the start since you have to swap between weapons so often, prioritizing picking squad mates for combat rather than story reasons, etc. But mechanically, ME2's combat, while imperfect, is so much more buttery smooth than ME1's that even with all this going on, it still felt like a step up to me as a gameplay experience. That said, particularly in the early game, I've still gotten annoyed quite a bit when I do something like pop my head out for 1 second, get one shot, and have to start a whole section over. Multiple things can be true at the same time, people! This certainly happened a lot on the final section where you fight the human Blue Suns commander Jador and the Krogan from the tanks, but with enough well-timed and well-placed shots, including with some heavy weapons like my grenade launcher, after a few tries it was almost trivial. And now, after researching a few new upgrades, we could wake up our sun, mine a few more planets, and we're at the facility to break out the biotic criminal, Jack. Just as with Garrus, Grunt's combat specialization helped balance out Miranda's and my biotic and tech powers. But something else I started to become more aware of was how low I was constantly running on Medigel. Fortunately, the game peppers enough of it throughout the environment that it's rare you actually run out completely. Well, at least in ME2, though it does encourage you to not rely too much on using Unity, which in turn encourages you to make sure your squad isn't put in as many situations where they might die. Because the code for the squad AI is still over 15 years old, this doesn't always work. But again, with enough patience, you can whittle down enemies even if your squad is lying on the ground half the time. After bringing Jack back to your ship, as I did between every mission, I checked my squad's weapons loadout and advanced some crewmate interactions. I also commented on the state of where we were in the game. Since I'd completed the first 4 main dossier missions, besides recruiting Kasumi and Zaid, who were originally DLC characters, the next mission I triggered would be Horizon. After checking in with Morden to observe the solution he'd concocted against the Collector's Seeker Swarms, it was time for the final Act 1 mission. I usually take Miranda and Morden to Horizon, and this playthrough was no different. I unlocked Cryoblast for Morden, though when fighting the Collectors, I'd mostly rely on stacking warps between Miranda and myself to take out their barriers and health. Horizon was also the first mission in ME2 where I'd encounter the Husks, one of the most annoying enemies in the entire trilogy because of how they swarm you. They also frequently have armor, which armor-piercing ammo is of course useful for, but why worry about that when you have Incinerate and Double Warp? Look, I'm not saying if you run out of ammo it's low-key your fault, but one good thing about Horizon though is that you pick up the Collector Particle Beam, one of my favorite weapons in the entire series that also has a close cousin in 3. Horizon also introduces Scions, which are notoriously slow to kill, but with enough persistence you can whittle down their armor. But even more annoying than the Husks, in my opinion, would be the Praetorian enemy, which not only has armor, but a periodically regenerating biotic barrier. This would, by far, be the enemy that took the longest to kill on both missions where it showed up, with my squad and me having to run circles around the central arena where some AA towers are located so as to keep our distance from it while we slowly destroyed it. I also had to do this for the Husks, Scions, and Collectors themselves. That's the funny thing about playing on Insanity. It makes you think about things you normally wouldn't. Thankfully, a bunch of these enemies were separated by distinct phases with autosaves, so dying to the Praetorian, for instance, wouldn't force me to start the whole tower section over. Mine some more planets to get some more upgrades, and boom, we're on Haestrom, where the sun, well, it does a lot of weird shit. The purpose of this mission is to finally recruit Tally to my squad, though we'd have to make our way through waves of Geth first. So I brought Miranda and Garrus so I'd have access to triple overload. Another observation I made to my chat is that fighting the Geth in Mass Effect 2, despite perhaps being harder on Insanity on paper, still felt better than fighting them in 1, in part because they're a familiar enemy, and being synthetics using tech powers to blast through them is pretty straightforward. Of course, one of the more annoying parts of the Haestrom mission is dealing with the Colossus in front of the building where Tally is located. As good old Cal Rieger tells you, the damn thing huddles down and repairs itself, meaning that spending time trying to blast it from afar while you also fend off regular Geth is largely a waste of time. The strategy for this section is to get as close to the Colossus as you can, so you can finish it off in one phase. There are 3 ways to get there, but the easiest is taking the right staircase to make your way across the sniper perch. In the meantime though, you can't totally ignore the other Geth on the battlefield because they'll start to swarm you nearly as badly as the husks. So it's kind of a slow approach, but it can't be too slow, otherwise Cal Rieger, who's trying to keep the Colossus off your ass, will kick the bucket. This can especially be a negative development if you end up doing Tally's loyalty mission without having accumulated enough Paragon or Renegade points, as having Vitor and Cal Rieger at the trial can help you prevent Tally from being exiled for treason. It shouldn't have been a problem having enough Renegade points on this playthrough, but Cal Rieger is such a chill guy, saving him was just a bonus. Funny enough, on my hardcore playthrough, I actually did fail to keep him alive, so it seemed there was a little RNG at play during my Insanity run. Or maybe I'm just good at the game. Having Tally in the squad was obviously a huge boon as well, since I can now take advantage not just of her AI hacking ability for the occasional synthetic enemies we'd be fighting throughout the rest of the playthrough, but also her combat drone, an engineer class specialty that also does a good job of distracting enemies. After mining some more resources, the first place I'd utilize my new companion was on Ilium, where I still had to recruit the Drell assassin Thane and Samara and Asari Justicar. I stocked up on some upgrades on the trading floor, facilitated an indentured servitude contract like a good Karen, and caught up with Liara before heading to the Dantius Towers. This was, to my recollection, also one of the first missions where I didn't bring a second biotic since I brought Garrus and Tally. While being the sole biotic on some of these Insanity missions would arguably make the game slightly harder, it wasn't to enough of a degree that I couldn't complete them or anything. I happened to bring the Collector Particle Beam with me, which made it easy to dispatch some of the mercs while Tally distracted them with her drone and hacked some of the Lokis. Teamwork makes the dream work, am I right? Okay, maybe having a second biotic is a good idea because I died a lot more to these mercs than I feel like I should have. Plus, I had to tell my squad mates where to go a lot on this mission. Weird. But in any event, after recruiting Thane and researching some more upgrades, I went and chatted him up before heading back down to Ilium to recruit Samara. Bringing Thane meant I now had a second biotic at my side again, meaning the return of double warp, and chat voted to bring Kasumi, another good choice. I had enough squad points to level up Thane's class specialization all the way to level 4, which is something I'd be able to do for lots of other characters in the near future as well. Being that this was an Insanity run, I typically prioritized health over additional weapons damage for my squad's level 4 evolutions, since they be dying a lot. And when evolving my level 4 class specialization, I further prioritized reducing power recharge times, which would also come in handy. Doing this also increased my Paragon and Renegade scores, putting me ever closer to being able to pass key checks later on. I recruited Samara and wound down the stream with some planet scanning. Session 4 would see us starting everyone else's loyalty missions. The first ones I'd knock out would be Morden and Grunts, so after some planet scanning, I headed to the Krogan homeworld of Tuchanka. We talked with Rex and proceeded towards Morden's student Malin's lab. Once again, not bringing a second biotic arguably made the combat a tinge more difficult, but I brought Morden and Grunt on each other's loyalty missions for story reasons, and we got through it. And, as always, Incinerate is goated. I chose to save Malin's data since destroying it causes the female Krogan Eve to die in 3. Grunt's loyalty mission, where you help him fight enemies to pass a sort of rite of adulthood, typically gives me trouble on higher difficulties because the enemy patterns are so random and disorganized, and the layout of the arena is not really conducive to staying in one place. But as many will observe, being mobile is actually the correct strategy. And of course, the Thresher Maw took a few tries, but I had my grenade launcher handy to whittle it down as well. Just kidding, that ran out super quickly, but between my other weapons and squad powers, we finally beat it. The next mission was scripted, the Collector Ship. There aren't many characters who have particularly unique dialogue in this mission, but Miranda and Morden are considered the optimal squad mates for combat, so I took them. One of the major developments of this mission is that Shepard gets advanced weapons training, which means you gain access to various types of weapons that are not available to your class at the start. You get to choose between shotgun hand training, assault rifle training, or sniper rifle training. As a sentinel, I'd been missing my sniper rifle dearly, but given how higher difficulties dilute the benefits of a sniper rifle for sentinels, it's recommended to go with AR training, which grants you access to the M96 Medic. On a lower difficulty practice run, the first time I gained access to it, I wasn't a believer, but I quickly became one. This weapon is sick. I normally don't fuck with assault rifles, but the Matic is perfectly balanced. It's a medium range weapon, and it's effective against armor, shields, barriers, all the things. So as much as it pained me to forego sniper rifle training, the Matic's general usefulness means there's a reason people make this recommendation. Fighting the collectors again, I did tend to run out of ammo pretty frequently, but I made up for it with powers and melee, especially on the husks. At the section with the Praetorian, it's easy enough for you and your squad to die that it's generally recommended to manually place your squad mates behind cover in the central area while you stay mobile. Once it got in range, I spammed missiles from my missile launcher, then used the Locust, the Matic, and my pistol at varying times to whittle down its barrier and armor, all while also fending off husks and collectors. This isn't even the most annoying part of the run. We'll get to that later too. Pivoting back to the loyalty missions, after a bout of planet scanning, I went ahead and got Jacobs out of the way since it's relatively simple. Borden has some mildly interesting dialogue for this mission, so I brought him along. I had nothing else to say about this mission. So this mission is called Jacob the Gift of Greatness. I did some more planet scanning and researched some more upgrades, then popped over to the Citadel to buy some more fish. I also brought Tally along to help prove a Quarian's innocence, and hunted down a less virtuous ex-cop, Harkin, for Garrus's loyalty mission. It's recommended to bring a soldier-class squad mate for this mission, so since I'd taken Grunt out quite a bit so far, I brought Zaid along. This one mech kept giving me trouble, but after it started focusing on Zaid, that bought me some time to knock out its shields and armor before it turned its attention to me. But the rest of the mission was mostly light work, and Thane's loyalty mission is largely no combat, so who you bring along doesn't really matter. Funny enough, I had actually built up enough Renegade points to use a Renegade dialogue option on criminal Elias Kellum to get him to reveal the name of the person Thane's son Kolyat was targeting for assassination.
That may go down in history as the shortest interrogation ever.
I didn't even have to engage in police brutality. After completing both Garrus and Thane's loyalty missions, after talking to them on the ship, I had the opportunity to initiate a romantic relationship with one of them. Typically, even when playing as FemShep, I've dated female characters in the past, but on a recent run, I ended up sort of accidentally falling into the Garrus romance, and it was pretty fun to see unfold. When streaming Insanity, I hadn't romanced Thane before, so I decided to initiate one with him. I knew how tragic of an ending that would have in 3, but hey, it's different. Zaid's loyalty mission was pretty straightforward as well, and it even yielded me a flamethrower, which I promptly unequipped once I got back to the ship. By this point, I also happened to have about 80% of my Renegade meter filled up, which meant I would almost certainly be able to pass some of the most difficult checks remaining in the game. You may or may not have noticed this, but the order I've been completing these missions has also been purposeful. They're optimized to help you get certain things done early while leaving some of the more difficult checks for later in the game. Some people think this makes the game less replayable since there's less of a reason to play the missions in any other order, but I wholeheartedly disagree. Part of the fun of Mass Effect is that there are millions of permutations of outcomes, so even slight changes here and there will have ripple effects, making each and every playthrough unique. Okay. Let me get off my soapbox. But to be specific, as those of you who have played the game before will likely know, 3 of the hardest checks in the game are resolving the dispute between Tally and Legion, resolving the dispute between Miranda and Jack, and being able to save Samara's daughter Morinth instead of Samara herself on her loyalty mission. Now, why would anybody want to save Morinth and Ardat Yakshi, who tricks her victims into sleeping with her only to drain their life energy and kill them? Well, Samara is a Justicar, which means she's an unelected cop who goes around imposing her morality on the galaxy. Is that much different from being a Spectre? No, but shh. First, though, I went ahead and swung by Ilium to do some side quests for Liara and complete Miranda's mission. And for unique dialogue, bringing Miranda and Jack to each other's loyalty missions is priceless. I was also reminded just how useful Jack's shockwave ability is, so that day I decided then and there that I'd take her on the Reaper IFF mission to help deal with those swarms of husks. I disposed of Miranda's shithead friend Niket to save her sister, then locked in my romance with Thane, researched some upgrades, dumped Samara for her daughter, and helped Jack blow up the Telton facility on Pragia, where she was tortured as a kid. I wound down that day's stream with some planet scanning, and the next week, it would be time for the last 4 story missions of the game. I opened my final ME2 session with the Reaper IFF mission, where I would of course be recruiting our Geth squadmate Legion. Tally has a lot of unique dialogue for this mission, and I could once again also take advantage of her combat drone. And like I mentioned a minute ago, bringing Jack felt necessary on this difficulty since Shockwave would help save my ass from those husks. The final combat section of this mission was always going to be particularly offensive with its difficulty, where you have to shoot the derelict Reaper's Mass Effect core while fending off waves of husks and abominations. I didn't realize until reading up on the wiki that the Mass Effect core closing is not timed. It's based on the amount of damage you've inflicted, though it only reopens after you've dealt with a certain number of enemies. Regardless, that knowledge gave me a little more confidence. I also figured out that staying mobile was going to be essential as well, since it would prevent me from being cornered as often by the husks, and I could do piecemeal damage to the core over time. It took a few tries, but I finally took care of this, and now we had Legion on board. I woke it up, progressed some dialogue, and proceeded to the location of the migrant fleet to help Tally face her treason charges. Fun fact, you can actually bring Legion on Tally's loyalty mission for some of the most unique dialogue in the game, and it's probably been one of my favorite things to do on my recent runs. It's such a flex, and by this point I've built up enough morality points to fend off any criticisms from the Quarians. But funny enough, even though the NPCs will definitely acknowledge Legion's presence, they don't always do it immediately or when you'd expect them to. Clearly BioWare didn't expect a ton of players to do this, but the fact that they anticipated it, period. God, ME2 is such an awesome game. Even though I had enough Renegade points to pass the check later, I still chatted up some of the admirals just in case, and so we could also hear some unique dialogue and showcase some good old Quarian lore on stream. By this point, since we were dealing with Rogue Geth, not having a second biotic in my party didn't quite matter as much. I didn't quite do the mission deathless, but since Tally and Legion both have AI hacking and combat drone, spamming both of them over and over again made this mission pretty painless. And to boot, it was no work at all to pass the check to keep Tally from getting exiled while maintaining her loyalty. Mine some planets, research some upgrades, and now it's time for Legion's loyalty mission. Just as with the last outing, bringing Tally on Legion's loyalty mission is a must from a unique dialogue standpoint. I deleted the heretics to strengthen the Quarian war assets in Mass Effect 3 in case I ran into a situation where I had to side with them, because while peace is the ideal option, if I'm forced, I'm not choosing synthetics over organics. On the eve of the suicide mission, my Shepard got it on with Thane, and then it was time to go through the Omega-4 relay. For the suicide mission itself, the game sort of encourages you to handpick the most optimal squad mates for each role. In order to bypass the collector base's thermal vents to get where your abducted crew is being held, you need to send in a tech specialist. Tally, Legion, or Kasumi are all ideal choices, assuming they're loyal, and my chat chose to send Kasumi into the vents. Pro tip: even though Jacob volunteers, don't do it. He'll die and potentially put the rest of your team at risk. Secondly, you need to choose somebody to lead a second squad to serve as a diversion while Shepard faces off against Harbinger. Ideal choices for this role are Miranda, Jacob, and Garrus, as they can lead through experience. However, I planned on taking Miranda and Morden as my squad mates so that I could take advantage one final time of Miranda's biotic support, now including Slam, and Morden's incinerated ability. So my chat chose Garrus to lead the second fire team. I pulled out all the stops against the collectors, this time on more of a time crunch since I had to get to the heat exchangers to keep Kasumi from cooking alive. For the next section called The Long Walk, you need to assign someone to maintain a biotic field around your squad to protect against the Seeker swarms. Miranda claims she can do it, though she's actually a suboptimal choice, and in any event, I wanted to keep her in my actual party. A loyal Jack or Samara are the best choices here, as is Morinth, but my chat chose Jack, and they also chose to keep Garrus as the second squad leader. As for who to send as the escort for Kelly, Dr. Chakwas, and the rest of my abducted crew, normally Morden is recommended for this task, but since I also wanted to keep him in my squad, most guides suggest Thane. This is because he's the only other character besides Grunt and Zaid who can't be chosen as a specialist or fire team leader for any other part of the mission without someone dying, and if you send Grunt or Zaid away themselves, the remaining team members left to hold the line are not sufficiently strong enough to do so without some of them dying. It's all based on something called the Hold the Line calculator, documentation for which I'll include in the description. During the last section, while I normally destroy the collector base on moral grounds, I decided to keep it to remain consistent with my Renegade run and yield more war assets in ME3. For the final phase against the Collectors and Human Reaper, I actually ran out of ammo and ended up dying. But when I respawned, the game gave me full magazines for all my weapons, so we beat the game no problem. After taking a break from streaming Insanity for a few weeks, I returned with Mass Effect 3. ME3 was going to be something of a different beast on many levels. Gameplay-wise, it's got some of the best combat in the trilogy, even if the story is kind of lacking. Regardless, I had a few specific tasks I wanted to accomplish. Like I mentioned earlier, in ME3, you have to broker agreements with various species and factions to build a united front against the Reapers, who are finally invading the galaxy directly. Your total strength is measured in units called war assets, and these can take many forms: individual people, mercenary groups, fleets, squadrons, regiments, platoons, technologies like the Reaper Heart, etc. Depending on the amount of war assets you have at the end of the game, you'll unlock certain endings. In the olden days, you could build up war assets by playing Mass Effect 3's multiplayer mode, though since multiplayer isn't included in Legendary Edition, this is no longer the case. Also, Legendary Edition changed the number of war assets required to unlock certain outcomes like Shepherd Living and more. For the purposes of this playthrough, since my main goal was to beat the game on Insanity and nothing else, I definitely could have just cut corners and done the bare minimum to complete the story. It wouldn't have been pretty, and indeed on my hardcore practice run, I skipped so many optional missions that my final squad got lasered at the end. Since I'd put in the effort to save everyone on the suicide mission in ME2, I figured I might as well try to save as many as I could in ME3. Well, with a few exceptions, which I'll get to later. In any case, I needed 4,200 war assets to get the ending I wanted. Since I was still partly referencing my unique dialogue guide, achieving this would be fairly feasible, but still a bit of a challenge, as will become clear later. I imported my character and kept my same class from ME2, Sentinel. My reasoning for this is that I wanted to continue taking advantage of combined biotic and tech abilities, and for my bonus power, I chose Barrier. This is because on my hardcore practice run, I played as a Vanguard, a highly recommended class for ME3 Insanity, but honestly, I kind of had a horrible time because my shields were practically non-existent. That said, I'd come to partially regret choosing Sentinel since Barrier was inaccessible pretty much every time I wanted to use it. To this day, I have no idea why this happened, so I actually do welcome clarification in the comments. Either way, after enduring some long cutscenes, I was thrust into the hot zone of Reaper enemies called Cannibals, which could be dispensed with a mix of biotics and bullets. Of course, as one of my friends predicted, I quickly ran out of ammo already in the prologue and had to resort to an all-powers run, but as I've described before, this honestly didn't bother me, since Anderson was my only and by the way, I'm saying all-powers run just for this mission, not for the whole thing. That's a whole other challenge in and of itself. Since Anderson was my only backup, I wouldn't get to experience the full advantages of ME3's biotic combos just yet, but I did not die on the first mission. Yay. Once we said goodbye to Anderson, it was off to Mars, where I would be joined by Caden, granting me biotic support, as well as James Vega, star of the 2012 Xbox and PlayStation exclusive 2D animated tie-in movie Mass Effect Paragon Lost, which I have an entire companion video about on my second channel, link in the description. Our goal on this mission would be to reach the Prothean archives, where the Alliance has uncovered more information about a potential way to stop the Reapers. Early on during the mission, I picked up and was able to equip the Mantis sniper rifle, which meant that somebody evidently realized the dev team effed up by not allowing Sentinels to use sniper rifles for half of ME2. I took a few deaths here and there, but we were ultimately able to dispense with the litany of Cerberus goons in our way. I was joined by Liara partway through this mission, which meant I could continue creating powerful biotic combos. We made our way to the archives, where we'd learn about the Crucible, an ancient weapon prior civilizations have tried to build to stop the Reapers, but presumably failed to complete given their extinction. While this is a major find, the occasion's interrupted by the elusive man who has a mole inside the Mars facility who downloads the data on the Crucible to send to Cerberus. The operative, who we end up chasing, Dr. Eva Corey, is actually an android, or, well, actually gynoid, made to appear like one of the elusive man's former associates. She seriously injures Caden before we finally disable the robot body. Our next destination is the Citadel, which has the medical facilities most equipped to treat Caden's injuries. We meet with the Council to discuss the Crucible, and they're as useless as ever, choosing to leave humanity to largely fend for ourselves while the Council races look inward. Except the Turian Councilor promises to provide some Turian support for Earth's defense if we can rescue their leader, Primarch Fedorian, on their homeworld Palaven's moon Mene. Mene would be our first encounter with husks in ME3, as well as mutated Turians called Marauders, who have shields you have to disable with overload before you can drain their health. But this mission would also prove relatively straightforward, as I still had Liara and James to back me up. My first death on Mene would only occur when Liara was switched out for Garrus, but with some well-timed range shots and power usage, that death was only a minor setback. As it turns out, Fedorian is dead, but we convince a general named Victus to take his place. Back on the Normandy, Edie, the ship's AI, downloads herself into Corey's body, meaning we'll have a new squad mate. I stopped by the armory to buy a few weapons and upgrades, including upgrades for the M97 Viper sniper rifle that I picked up on Mene, and one of the guns I'd keep equipped for the entire rest of the playthrough. Before heading to the next mission, I did some limited planet scanning to acquire supplementary war assets. Many of these would allow me to passively complete side quests on the Citadel, which would grant me credits and XP, but unlike during my ME2 streams, I wasn't going to spend quite as much time scanning in between missions, because lots of these war assets could be acquired towards the end of my playthrough without really penalizing me all that much. And if I played my cards right, I wouldn't have to do much extra planet scanning at all. Before continuing to the next story mission on the Solarian homeworld of Surkesh, I had a few other stops to make, and let me tell you, that took a while. Let me explain. After your first visit to the Citadel, one of the optional missions you unlock is called Recover Prothean Artifact, alternatively known as Priority Eden Prime. Part of ME3's first act by default in Legendary Edition, this mission was originally part of the Day 1 DLC From Ashes, which features the Prothean character Javik, whom you awaken from a 50,000-year cryosleep. While technically recruiting him would not be mandatory for this run, not only does Priority Eden Prime yield a pretty decent amount of war assets, but Javik as a squad mate is considered optimal for various story missions, and for good reason. Not only is he a biotic, but two of his abilities, Slam and Dark Channel, with an effect similar to Warp, are incredibly valuable during combat. Plus, from a story perspective, lots of Javik's dialogue is quite well written, and spoiler alert, it's practically a crime to not bring him when completing Priority Thessia. Additionally, Priority Eden Prime yields another awesome weapon, the Particle Rifle, similar to the Collector Particle Beam that I endlessly enjoyed using in Mass Effect 2. But before I could take advantage of any of this, I had to get to Javik first, and let me tell you, this took forever. Funnily enough, Eden Prime is one of the few missions I didn't practice on hardcore, which is a damn shame because I probably could have used the experience. I'm not joking when I say it took me almost an hour just to get to his stasis pod because I took like 10 deaths making my way through waves of Cerberus troops and turrets across the colony map, including one section that had what seemed like a uniquely low number of autosave points. For my squad on this mission, I brought Liara since she was essentially still my only biotic companion at this point, and for story reasons, it thematically makes sense for her to study this Prothean artifact. For my other companion, I actually brought Edie, since according to her, she's eager to test out her new body's abilities. In addition to Overload, probably the one I was most interested in was Incinerate, which is once again highly effective against armor. But despite our eventual progression to the pod, the suffering didn't end there. I spent almost another hour defending the pod against a final wave of Cerberus enemies, including an Atlas mech, racking up another 11 deaths. The Atlases are very hard to take down on this difficulty, and often, if you don't move quickly enough, while being shot at by other enemies mind you, they'll obliterate you before you can obliterate them. Normally, I just use my god gamer skills, but the problem here was that I had a relatively low amount of ammo and had to run away from the pod to gather any, and to top it all off, I'd wasted all but one of my unities. Assigning Edie and Liara to specific cover eventually helped stop them dying so much, but we eventually finished off the last wave. Suffice it to say, this fight sucked, and what pissed me off more was that I later looked up various ways to cheese it, but it didn't matter. We had Javik. I didn't equip the particle rifle just yet since it's so heavy, and I spent a good amount of the playthrough just carrying the Viper as well as a pistol and for a while an SMG, but no other assault rifles or shotguns. After this, I stopped back by the Citadel to complete some aforementioned side quests, as well as visiting Caden at the hospital and seeing my boyfriend Thane. I spoke with Miranda, and I also completed a mission involving an indoctrinated Hanar diplomat, during which I was assisted by a Solarian Spectre named John Dumbao, and none other than Kasumi, both of whom can become war assets. After purchasing a few more upgrades, I had one more stop before Surkesh, Grissom Academy, which I was tasked with helping evacuate. Once again, this mission is optional as well, and I didn't practice it on hardcore either. But it yields enough war assets that I didn't want to pass it up, and skipping it has other negative consequences as well. Specifically that Jack, whom you recruit as a war asset if completing Grissom Academy, returns towards the end of the game as an indoctrinated Cerberus Phantom. I brought Edie and Liara again, and I also died a few times on this mission, but it was nowhere near as tedious as Eden Prime. Among the other war assets I gained were Lieutenant Kaylee Sanders, an old flame of Anderson's, as well as several biotic students under Jack's tutelage, who I promptly sent to the front lines. They'd die, but that would get me much closer to that 4,200 number. Finally, we could progress the plot. It was time to hold our interspecies summit in the Eon cluster, attended solely by Victus, as well as the Solarian Dalatras, and none other than Rex, representing the Krogan. Rex brings up Malin's research on curing the genophage, a contentious subject as the Turians and Solarians have reservations about curing it, even in the face of the Reaper invasion. After landing on Surkesh, I'd be fighting Cerberus a third time in a row, but this time I brought Liara and Garrus. Our objective would be to retrieve a female Krogan being held on the planet, the sole survivor of Malin's experiments. We'd be assisted by Morden while Rex helps fight more Cerberus troops on the top level of this research facility. With minimal deaths, I proceeded to a planet in the Attican Traverse, where a team of Krogan scouts is responding to reports of Rachni activity. This team, called Aralok Company, is led by our son Grunt, who's come a long way since we got him out of that tank. This mission introduces the M451 Firestorm flamethrower into Mass Effect 3, just like the one we previously picked up during Zaid's loyalty mission in ME2. Get it? 451? Anyone? Hello? You spend a lot of time burning down webbing in a cool underground cave system with lots of bioluminescently lit puddles on this planet. This was the first mission where I brought Javik during this playthrough, showcasing his awesome biotic powers I mentioned earlier, and I had Garrus as well for combat support. Turns out the Rachni we're facing are Ravagers, Rachni modified to act as walking turrets with armor that pack a powerful punch, and they're joined by cannibals and husks. the end point of this mission either puts you face to face with the Arachni Queen, or if you kill her in ME1 like I did on this run, a Reaper clone of her. You have a chance to make another decision here about whether to exterminate the Arachni, and the outcomes are pretty nuanced. If you're interacting with the Queen herself, sparing her can actually have a somewhat positive outcome as the Arachni become genuinely cooperative with the war effort, but this comes at the cost of some of your Krogan war assets, since Krogan were of course instrumental in ending the Arachni wars centuries ago. However, if you're facing the clone, letting her live is completely suboptimal as she goes on to betray the Alliance, so it's genuinely never worth it. Without hesitation, I left the breeder clone for dead in order to save our lot company. Overall, I died a few times on this mission too, but we were more or less in and out, and I could start the first of 3 Tuchanka missions. The first one would involve rescuing the Primarch's son, Lieutenant Tarquin Victus, who leads a platoon whose ship has been downed on the surface. Since the mission involves Turians, bringing Garrus along results in some unique dialogue, and my chat voted to bring James as well since he hadn't joined us in a while. This mission isn't explicitly mandatory, but it does contribute towards the overall war asset count, and it just feels wrong not to do it when you're trying to convince the Primarch to help out Earth. Getting to Victus was kind of grueling, and it was also probably the most annoying mission on my hardcore playthrough. I did die quite a bit, particularly to harvesters, more heavily armored enemies, which fire at you with even more deadly force and are much harder to kill than Ravagers. I sort of regretted not bringing another biotic along, but we eventually got through. Another optional mission that's still nevertheless appropriate to complete is Tuchanka Bomb, in which you help Lieutenant Victus disable a bomb left on Tuchanka by the Turians during the Krogan rebellions. Cerberus has discovered the bomb and plans to detonate it, which would cause immense casualties on the planet and of course hurt our Krogan military strength, so disabling it makes sense. Ironically, while I don't think I've ever skipped this mission, it was also quite tedious in a manner similar to Eden Prime, and I probably spent about 45 minutes trying to take out multiple Atlases while Cerberus troops got past me and kept firing on Victus. I'd never had trouble with this before, but I finally did end up staying closer to him while Garrus and Edie helped me keep the Atlases at bay. Some of these things you never really think about on lower difficulties. I wanted to move straight into Priority Tuchanka to complete Act 1, but alas, since I was reaching the 12-hour mark, that was the conclusion of my first ME3 session. A week later, I opened my stream with Priority Tuchanka, and my chat voted for me to bring Garrus and Liara, appropriate given their shared history with Rex. The objective would be to deliver the genophage cure to a structure called the Shroud. Funnily enough, I was expecting this mission to be kind of a slow start to my stream, but I completed it pretty expediently and with only a couple deaths. One section I wasn't looking forward to features a lot of brutes, armored Reaper fusions of Krogan and Turians, but I realized I could just run past them while activating the hammers to summon the Thresher Maw Kalros and take down the Reaper threatening the Shroud. Even though I was continuing my renegade path, I decided to cure the genophage, as not doing so meant I'd lose lots of Krogan war assets, even if it meant foregoing lots of Solarian support. As per my chat, Garrus and Javik join me again for Priority the Citadel 2, when Shepard responds to a Cerberus coup orchestrated by Udina. This mission also results in Thane being stabbed by the Cerberus-aligned character Kai Lang, while Thane helps defend the Solarian Counselor, the first of multiple deeply grating encounters with Lang throughout the game. For the uninitiated, I'll eventually get into more detail about what fighting Kai Lang is like, but for now, I had a few other tasks I had to complete on the Citadel. After joining Thane during his dying moments, along with Kolyat, I completed some side quests before returning to the Normandy. At this point, I had some options. I had the opportunity to go ahead with the Corian Geth storyline, but if I did it this early, I feared I'd end up still not having enough reputation points to achieve peace, which would hurt my military strength, jeopardize my chances of getting a good ending, and also be less narratively satisfying. I've done it on stream before, so I wanted to do it again. I decided to move forward with another optional mission, responding to a distress call from an Ardat Yakshi monastery. Even though this yielded few war assets, especially since Samara wouldn't be present, I figured it would also be a good idea to practice fighting Banshees, or Reaper-mutated Asari, who have biotic barriers and armor, and can teleport. God help us all. I brought Liara for obvious reasons, and my chat voted for me to bring Caden, who had just rejoined the Normandy crew after being released from the hospital following Priority of the Citadel 2. This also meant I had double biotic support, making this mission a relative cakewalk that I completed deathless. Another optional mission I could have completed at this point is called RA Ex Cerberus Scientists, where we'd be able to recruit Jacob as a war asset among others. But since I haven't played that mission in years and felt like I'd probably waste a lot of time, I elected to skip it. But I still felt like I didn't have quite enough reputation to initiate the Rannoch quests, so I actually headed back to the Citadel to do even more side quests early. Just as with my inability to avoid the final Saren fight in ME1, I'm still not exactly sure why I was so much more underleveled on this Insanity run than some of my prior playthroughs, but I talked to a bunch of people in order to fill my reputation meter closer to 4 bars. I then moved forward with Priority Perseus Vale, meeting with the Quarian admirals, before infiltrating a Geth dreadnought to disable a Reaper signal interfering with the Quarians' ability to fight. Bringing Tally is required for this mission, and my chat voted to bring Garrus, which granted us some flirty dialogue between our 2 reuniting Mass Effect 1 companions, and also they were in 2. While this squad selection meant I once again wouldn't have biotic support, that ended up not being such a problem as our combined tech powers would compensate to overwhelm our synthetic opponents. In addition to my Shepard once again sharing overload with Garrus, Tally's clutch AI hacking ability, as well as her combat and defensive drones, would serve us well. We freed Legion from being held captive, and it joined us on the Normandy as well as an advisor. Next was another mission that's technically optional overall, but also necessary to facilitate peace, saving Admiral Chorus, whose ship has crash-landed on Rannoch. He's needed to lead the civilian fleet, so I brought Tally, and as chosen by chat, James for combat support to rescue him, before committing to Priority Rannoch, where the Quarians could retake their former homeworld. I needed to do one more mission that's also optional, but still necessary for peace, disabling a server on Rannoch that's controlling Geth fighter squadrons. This is a rare no-combat mission in ME3, which sees Shepard's consciousness integrated into the server, and the player equipped with a gun to destroy Reaper code. After this, it was time to liberate Rannoch once and for all from the Reapers. In addition to Tally, I brought Javik to give him the satisfaction of helping take down one of these big squid machines. After suffering a minute number of deaths over these past few missions, I managed to navigate my way to achieving peace between the Geth and Quarians, which brought my war asset count way up past my target 4,200 number. I still had a few story missions I needed to complete, but I was closing in on the end of Act 2. I needed to visit the Citadel one last time to speak to the Asari counselor and finish up some last side quests, but this also meant I didn't have to do any more planet scanning for the purposes of this playthrough. The next major mission was Priority Thessia, which Liara would of course join me on, and like I alluded to earlier, bringing Javik yields unique dialogue given the Protheans essentially uplifted the Asari. After making our way through Reaper forces to a temple secretly housing a Prothean beacon, we're assaulted by Kai Ling. Fighting him is one of the most infuriating aspects of Mass Effect 3, because while he has a moderate amount of health, his shields have got to be the strongest in the trilogy. The fact that a single Cerberus operative takes longer to whittle down than a Marauder is such whack video game logic and, to be frank, just bad writing, but I digress. Typically, the katana-wielding rat-tail freak quickly dispenses with your squad, and annoyingly, he's covered by gunship fire while recharging his shields. This also notably concludes in a scripted loss on Thessia, also particularly offensive given the Asari should, by virtue of their biotic abilities and technological prowess, be the strongest force in the galaxy against the Reapers. The third-to-last mission in the game sees us return to Horizon to rescue Miranda's sister Oriana from their father, who has set up a facility called Sanctuary that covertly houses Cerberus-backed experiments on human subjects. You fight Cerberus and the Reapers here, and I brought Caden given his history on Horizon and biotic abilities, as well as Tally as voted by chat. while I completed Thessia deathless. I did rack up quite a few more deaths here, but I managed to save both Miranda and Oriana while Miranda dispensed with her father once and for all. While I had the opportunity to start Act 3, since I had been streaming for over 10 hours, I wanted to save the final two missions, Priority Cerberus Headquarters and Priority Earth, for one final stream. I made a save on the Normandy in case I wanted to do anything else, not Act 3 related, later on this file. On my third and last ME3 session, I dove straight into the Cerberus Headquarters mission, which Edie joins by default. I brought Liara for biotic support, and in retrospect, I think it also makes sense to involve her on this mission as payback for Thessia. Before starting Priority Earth, I made some final rounds on the Normandy, including upgrading one of my pistols and equipping the particle rifle. For the first section after initially landing in London, I brought Caden and James for thematic reasons to help defend our homeworld. Naturally, I took a few deaths, but otherwise we made it pretty smoothly to the next checkpoint. I talked to a bunch of my companions before beginning the final assault. My chat voted for me to bring Garrus and Javik to the final section, which was also naturally challenging, but after a few more deaths, I managed to clear out the Reaper enemies and make my way to the early 2010s Blue Skybeam. For some reason, I lacked enough Paragon or Renegade points to convince the elusive man to take his own life, but the outcome was the same. After talking with the the Catalyst, it was time to decide which ending to choose. I also didn't have enough war assets for Synthesis, but I've never had much interest in pursuing that ending. Would Karen Shepard choose Control, so she can become the manager, or would she choose Destroy, so she can end the manager? As I usually do, I chose the Destroy ending because my character had had enough fighting the Reapers on this Insanity playthrough. And with that, that was my experience playing my favorite game trilogy on its highest difficulty for the first and, God willing, probably last time. I want to thank everyone who watched my Insanity streams, including my moderators and people who gave me donations. I would also be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to the editors of the Mass Effect Wiki and some of the dedicated fans who put together various guides for things like unique dialogue, squadmate selection, keeping track of war assets, and more. I'll put links to some of that material in the description as well. This video was sponsored by my Patreon. By becoming a patron of mine, you're not only supporting the channel, but you also get access to some awesome perks. There are 5 tiers, each with their own unique benefits. At the $2 per month level, you'll get your name in the credits of my videos, plus behind the scenes photos, patron-only polls, and special roles in my Discord, as well as ultra-high resolution digital artwork like the maps from my videos where I chart the routes of various Starfleet ships. You can also read my Star Trek fan comic, Star Trek Endurance. At the $5 level, in addition to the previous rewards, you'll get exclusive monthly vlogs and occasionally extended cuts of some of my video essays. $10 gets you a follow on social media, if that's something you care about, plus a personalized thank you message in your Patreon inbox. At $25, you'll be credited as a top patron and get early access to all rough cuts and occasional script drafts. At the $50 level, I'll give you a verbal shout out in one of my videos, and at $100, well, let's just say at that point, I'm just grateful to have your support. Even if you sign up for the free tier, you can still follow some of my major channel updates. If you join as a YouTube member, you'll get similar perks, but not as many as on my Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/OrangeRiver to sign up today. With that, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed my video, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below and don't forget to share it. That stuff really helps me out. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that too so you won't miss future uploads, and click the bell icon to receive all notifications. If you want to support my work even further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/OrangeRiver, link in the description, or become a YouTube member by clicking the join button on my channel page. Or you can drop a one-time super thanks or PayPal donation. All are appreciated. Links to my PayPal, as well as my social media and merch store, are in the description too. Also, just as a reminder, I do have a second channel, OrangeRiver Plus, where I've uploaded the VODs of lots of my gaming streams, with more on the way. And in addition to some other goofy one-offs like my Paragon Lost video and extra behind-the-scenes content, I've officially made it my second streaming platform, so be sure to subscribe there too so you don't miss any new content. That's all I have for this week. I should go. Do you like merchandise? If so, head on over to the new and improved OrangeRiver merch store. That's right, OrangeRiver is now officially on Spreadshop. I've got a bunch of awesome new designs, including All the Way Down,
All the way.
Vape God, Tally, aka Best Girl,
It was totally worth it.
and what is perhaps my greatest design yet,
I love being married to my husband.
plus I've got some of my classic designs like OrangeRiver Arrowhead, N7, and more. And there are even some new products like OrangeRiver hats. That's right, OrangeRiver hats now exist. Visit the link in the description to get discounts and other special deals on items from my store.